Thanks for that, and thanks for the finally. It's always good to hear that we're being considered. So thanks to Debbie for introducing our linkages with through the UN partnership to UKMO, so I don't have to talk all that much about it. Our team or our section is quite new at the Bureau, so we've just passed the 2-year mark. My team, the oldest, most senior team member in terms of serving at the Bureau, has been now with us for 10 months, so don't expect us to do any fancy coupling and high-level simulations. So what I'll be talking about today is really the achievements to date, well, the motivation for why we exist in the first instance, the achievements to date and where we want to take the land surface modeling at the Bureau into the future. So the motivation really for the hydrology section to exist is manifold. So we've got the research and development plan 2020-2030 from the Bureau, and across all objectives, hydrology has been highlighted. The land surface needs to be better represented in terms of its water, carbon, temperature, and other things. And it can only be done if we uplift the current model. So the model we are using, at the moment, the Bureau uses a lot of different land surface models, one way or the other. Within the NWP, we have joules, but then all the hydrology, or most of the hydrology is based on AURA, so the Australian Water Resources Assessment. And we want to bring that together because AURA can't really be run in forecasting mode or for predictions. It's a water balance model and not a land surface scheme. But that also means that we need to look more closely into joules and how joules actually works in the Australian environment. And given that it's not doing that well on the Southern Hemisphere, we need to do a lot of things. And Martin Best, my colleague at UK Met Office, when I went there in May, he was saying the one thing he learned about Australia during my stay there was it's bloody different. And we are a country or a continent of extremes, and we need to consider that properly in the land surface models. And the land surface model with only 5 plan functional types is probably not going to do well down here. So the joules within the Earth system model at the Bureau is, even though Debbie's been talking about the atmosphere only, there's joules in there. So we need to change the terminology there. It's atmosphere and the land is being run all the time because you can't run the atmosphere without the land, but we can run the land without the atmosphere. So we are the key. So currently Joule sits within a few aspects within what we are doing at the Bureau. It ranges from the urban simulations over to the outlooks. I'm not going to talk about climate because I'm a hydrologist. I'm not that interested in climate really. So what we are after really is to look into integrating joules to have consistent physics across the different applications, and not having one model for one thing, another model for the other thing, and then we have catchment models that do a totally different thing for the flooding. So we want to get away from that and base everything on the same physics so that we have that seamlessness across spatial scales and also temporal scales. Moreover, we want to get away from using climatologies. So within the NWP, we use land surface climatologies for the vegetation. Now, the land surface climatology was developed over the period 2000 to 2010, which was probably not the best time in Australia to develop anything for vegetation climatology, as we all know. And we're currently looking into changing that and assessing what it means to look into developing a climatology for the last 20 years and what the differences are and what the impact is. However, we want to move towards interactive vegetation, where we can actually simulate the vegetation within the model, let it grow, let it die, according to the natural behavior. Similarly, the interconnection with NEMO is not there, so NEMO also uses land surface climatologies in terms of the stream flow that comes into the ocean. Again, we want to change that by having actually more realistic runoff going into the oceans, even though Australia doesn't have all that much runoff going into the oceans. And at the end also, the H there is Aura. Aura, some of you may have been using it, and I've been getting emails saying, oh, don't turn off Aura. So Aura will be phased out if we can show that Joules can actually do the hydrology properly, because we don't want to have a massive overhead. And again, not having inconsistent output. And then there's a new thing that my team is introducing, and that's called flood guidance. I want to introduce that terminology here, because the Bureau is responsible for flooding. Well, not flash floods, but we're not responsible for the flooding, sorry, responsible for the predictions of it. So issuing flood warnings and things like that. However, that's only based on catchment models and only on selected catchments. However, with a land surface scheme running across the entire continent, and you'll see that later, we'll be able to run something that we want to call flood guidance, because it's not really warning, because it's gridded, but we want to be able to run it across the entire continent, so that even in regional Australia we can say, oh, there's a risk of some sort of flood coming along. So we've developed, in the hydrology sciences section, we've developed a bit of a model in the R&D. So in my team, in the hydrological modeling team, we'll be looking into improved model states. So we'll be looking into uplifting Joules to better perform in terms of soil moisture, in terms of stream flow, vegetation dynamics, and also land surface temperatures, as we've heard, especially if you want to simulate sounders over the land. You can't really do that if you don't have the right land surface temperature and acidities. So we want to improve that as well, to be able to improve the amount or increase the amount of data we can actually assimilate into the atmosphere as well. So all these states will feed into the various applications that we have at in the Bureau and in conjunction with our customers, of course. And you see all the flow goes from the model development, model improvement, all the way to our customers, including the community, the population of Australia, not only insurance, agriculture. So there's a bigger picture in mind, because if we improve the land surface, we will invariably also improve other forecasting skills. So in what's called the Seamless Hydrological Modeling Project, which is basically the core of the hydrological modeling team, we'll be looking into various things. We'll be looking into, first and foremost, the soil physics. Australia is a very old continent compared to the Northern Hemisphere. We have very flat areas as well, where you have water ponding. We have extreme events where you have soil armoring. So that means the rainfall doesn't even get into, because the soil has been sealed, essentially. It needs to be softened up. All those things are not properly recognized. And we're also testing the various soil physics and models. We'll be looking into vegetation, broadening the types of vegetation, and especially given that we're only looking into Australia, we can look into better parameterizing evergreen trees, for example, introducing other vegetation types as well, because the new Joules version has 13 instead of 5 vegetation types that we can exploit. We'll also be, Luigi is working on producing new land cover maps for us, because the global land cover maps, they are not quite there yet for us, especially if you look into some of them having forests in central Australia. If you haven't been there, go and look for the forest. You won't find many of them. Then we'll be looking to the stream flow. So that's one of the things, actually. We have a gridded land surface model. How do we get to stream flow? I'll be talking about that. Then we'll also be increasing the amount of remote sensing that we use for the model development, model validation, data assimilation into the model, and the benchmarking. At the moment, the only thing that we're doing for the land surface is really we assimilate soil moisture. That's it. So there's much more out there that we can utilize. And then in the mid to long term of the project, we will also be looking into urban hydrology, because it's also not really done all that great. applications for fires, and so on and so forth. So to show you some of the initial value results that we have, we looked into the Bara runs where there's joules. We also have what's called Bara offline, which is the land surface only scheme, but with the same configuration as within Bara, and we compared it against in situ. And we're actually doing really well. And when you compare it to Aura-L, which is our current hydrology, it's especially the surface soil moisture is doing much better in terms of temporal correlations than in joules than in Aura. And that would already be showing that we have a significant step forward. In the same instance, the root zone has the same performance as Aura. So that already indicates that we're on the right track, and we can safely say that we will be phasing out Aura in the next 3 to 4 years and replace it with an offline joules that provides an advanced hydrology. We've also looked into the forecasting skills of joules in terms of soil moisture and compared it against various sites. And again, we see the same pattern. We have a high skill already in terms of the temporal correlation, and we are exceeding the skills of Aura across. What we found during our validation, actually, and we really need to talk about that, is that there are some of the Ostflux sites, they have biases in the radiation and the precipitation. So while Turn provides a nice data set, we found a few issues, and we need to go back to that one. In terms of the streamflow routing, so what we're doing is, because the land surface model only provides surface runoff from the pixel, and then that's one. So we put it all into a routing scheme that was developed in Japan, and we've been running it at 5-kilometer resolution across the entire continent. And you can see how well we can actually reproduce the stream flow. So the network that you see in the center here on the map is come from Karma, and you can clearly see the Murray-Darling system and the Lake Eyre contributions. Well, the gas down here, so all the rivers flowing into Lake Eyre. So with that, we are quite confident that the water goes where it should go, and even work with extreme catchments like the Gascoigne, where we really only have 1 or 2 runoff events per year, otherwise it's dry. We're already doing really well in terms of the timing, and we're doing reasonably well with the peak, and that's only with a off-the-shelf routing model. Now we need to work on the rivers themselves, the parameterization of the river roughness, cross-section, and so forth. But again, we're already on a very good track there. We've already developed something that we call a probabilistic flood inundation map. So we're going basically now, in research at least, it's not available outside yet. We take the runoff from the gridded model, we put it into the routing scheme, and then we use the flow depth that we get, put it into another system, and therefore we get 5-meter resolution probabilistic in flood inundation maps because we run on soils. We've done that now for the Hawkesbury Nepean and the Brisbane River catchment. So for the Brisbane River catchment, then what we can produce already internally is something like this, where we then have flood inundation maps growing and receding for the city. Now, this is only taking into account the DEM, not the buildings themselves. That's outside of our responsibility. That's the local water authorities that need to do that. So just to reconfirm, we're going back to what we are going to do with it. We will have a joules that will be running offline with a much advanced hydrology, vegetation, higher resolution than in the NWP. But at the same time, the improvements that we are developing within the offline system, only for Australia, we will feed back through our UN partnership to the Met Office for inclusion into the global simulation, so that we have also a global impact on joules in terms of its performance throughout. So at the Bureau, we will always have a coupled system with a simplified land surface and a much more advanced offline version. All right, I hope I'm not keeping up everyone from eating soon. So if you feel like it, write an email to us, and happy to discuss things here or in the future.